Hello viewers and welcome yet to another special edition of this Economics 101. Yes indeed, it is still the month in which we are celebrating all things to do with the young people, and we are speaking economics based on the background of exactly that. Now, to discuss all things to do with the vulnerability as well as exponential growth of youth in business today, in this special edition I am joined in studio by Farai Muvuti, a young entrepreneur as well as publisher, as well as a Mr. Gashirai Nyemba, who is a marketing consultant. Gentlemen, welcome to Economics 101.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for having me, Curtley.
And you are very, very much welcome on this show that we are discussing all things to do with young people. Perhaps I'll start with you, Mr. Gashirai Nyemba. Basically break down with us. Our viewers want to know how perceptible as well as fertile is the ground for young people to do business in Zimbabwe.
Well, I think this is one question that is very self-evident. When you go out there, you go outside, you move in the streets of Farai, you can see that what seems to be the backbone of the economy, of the indigenized economy in Zimbabwe, are the youth. Over the last few years, we've seen more and more young people opening up their business, starting their own ventures, enterprising, because I feel that as a country, we've come to a place where we feel that as youth, we have an active role to play in the economy.
Perhaps with you, Mr. Farai, basically break down with us how fertile has the ground been with regards to young people doing business within our scope and within the general scope over the past years, as you've seen.
I think, thank you yet again for having me. I think given our median age rate, your average age ranging between, of course, 15 to about 30s, you find that a huge chunk of our population is youth-focused. So naturally, the biggest performers in terms of the economic aspect of it is going to be us, fundamentally the youth. Now, from a policy perspective, I've appreciated the fact that we have a ministry dedicated fully to youth issues, and I find that policymakers have taken this issue very seriously. So from a policy perspective, I think there's a lot of growth. Are there gaps? Of course there would be, and there's always room. The largest room in the world is going to be one for improvement. But what I'm seeing from a participatory level, a lot of youth are engaged in business. So in the area that I'm in, for example, we are in communication as well as manufacturing. A huge chunk of our employment base is actually youth. So they have a sense of dexterity, they have a sense of dedication, there's clarity of thought in as far as the visions that they have. When I speak to our staff members, especially those that are quite young, there's a clear direction of where they want to place themselves in the company. In terms of entrepreneurship, there's a lot of activity. My counterparts in the manufacturing industry as well as in media and communications are actually youth. A vast amount of people we interact with on a day-to-day basis are people with clear visions about where they want to see themselves within the context of the country. So I'm enthused as well as I am quite ambitious, and equally my aspirations about youth development and planning and how we grow the economy with a youth-centric focus, I think is extremely energized, and I have great hopes for the future.
Okay, great hopes for the future, like you have rightly put. Perhaps back to you, Mr. Gashirai. We can understand these riveting statistics, perhaps of Zimbabwe having an occupation or within our country and landscape of over 60% being a youth dividend.
Yes.
However, do the young people actually appreciate their role within the economy at this rate, at this juncture, with this statistic, perhaps even relating it to your space that you occupy?
I think just building on what Farai said, you see, with the rise of youth participating in Zimbabwe, I think that need for youth to be participating is self-evident, given the number of youth who have started businesses. In my field, I work with a number of companies, and I can safely say that out of the maybe 20 companies or so we work with, maybe 50% are youth-owned. And within those companies, you actually do see youth playing an active role towards growing their space and taking over spaces that were mostly run by large companies, some which were conglomerates that may have left, and you see youths coming into that space and taking over. I mean, for instance, we now have youths participating in the energy sector. Back then, that was not possible. But now you see more and more youths taking part in the energy sector. We have more youths now bringing about alternative solar solutions. So if over the last few months, you actually notice that majority of the alternative energy companies are youth run. A lot of the new technologies coming to the country are as a result of efforts by youth.
Absolutely. And if young people are going to be taking out, just building on perhaps what both of you have brought in as input, if young people are going to be at the helm of perhaps the backbone of some of the sectors that are occupied here in Zimbabwe, we are talking about agriculture, mining, engineering itself, farming, we perhaps want to have an appreciation. How well have young people, or even just got insight and education around some of these sectors? Perhaps you, Farai.
I think in that very context, there is a large gap in terms of awareness around, the areas of development in which the youth can partake. But what excites me is that there is an acknowledgement of that particular gap, and policymakers are clearly doing a lot of work in terms of how to close that particular gap. But one of the examples is what the Ministry of Higher Tertiary Education and Tertiary, I think it's called, they are doing. So, for example, they're introducing what they call a Heritage 5.0. And when I looked at the document of Heritage 5.0, there's a focus on innovation, a focus on entrepreneurship. And I think at an academic level, we could all agree that historically this has not been the case, because the adjustment of the economy requires us to actually position ourselves as an economy for that particular future. Now, with that focus from our education department, looking towards its combination and collaboration with industry, I think the potential for closing that gap of awareness it will definitely occur.
Awareness should be raised and will be raised, and within the scope of some of the works of the Second Republic, and appreciation of Heritage 5.0, Education 5.0, as well as a lot of programs that have been running around within Zimbabwe that we'll have an appreciation of as we go on with this particular program. But for now, we'll take a short break. Economics 101 is here and here to stay. Please don't go anywhere. Thank you very much, viewers, for staying with us. This is still Economics 101, your go-to program for everything to do with the tracking of a Vision 2030, as well as ensuring that Zimbabwe achieves an upper middle income economy by the year 2025. Now, we, of course, want to continue with the conversation that we have been following in studio today with young people, all things to do with entrepreneurship, business, and it being a fertile ground for the everyday Zimbabwean, which occupies over 60% of our population. And yes, Farai and Gashirai, thank you so much for staying with us, gentlemen. And indeed, it is a pleasure to be ensuring that we are tracking all things to do with this conversation. Perhaps we'll just pick it up from where we left off, Farai. We were talking about Heritage 5.0 and there being a certain educational context and awareness that is going to be built from some of these sectors that intertwine with agriculture, mining, as well as infrastructure itself.
Indeed.
How best has that implemented and inputted?
Well, listen. Since I've been in the country, I think ranging about 6 months now, I've visited University of Zimbabwe quite a lot. And if you look at the technology hub that they've built, if you look at the focus on innovation that they are actually pursuing, from creating their own products, and I think during the COVID period, for instance, the university itself was actually at the center of that particular innovation. So ventilators, for example, were being created locally here. You know, a number of products that we saw, be it from food to luxury goods, are being done in the university, which demonstrates that post that phase, these particular students are going to go into industry and not only just be workers in that industry, but critical leaders and drivers of new innovation that is Africa-centric. I think the greatest gap that we have in Africa, especially our youth, is that we have not, post the decolonial phase, we've not looked at the, we have civil rights, now we need silver rights. And the youth can be a pivotal player. And that particular Heritage 5.0 serves as a driving force to enable that environment.
Okay.
Gashirai,
anything to chime in?
That actually,
yeah.
you know,
Sure.
I myself actually am a product of those innovation hubs. I was actually spent some time at Midland State University.
Okay.
And one of the key things we actually came up with at that time was creating a digital platform for students to be able to trade amongst themselves. So, you know, I feel that I've always been a proponent of the fact that you should not wait to graduate or to finish school or so on to be able to start doing business. You start the moment you feel that I can make money.
Okay.
So I think those innovation hubs and all that, when Heritage 5.0 actually is playing a pivotal role in instilling that culture of entrepreneurship in our youth. So I think I would say kudos to the ministry for that.
Absolutely, and the ministry and the government has been making strides with regards to their contribution there. Gentlemen, let's go post the student, post the graduate, and perhaps the one who they call has gotten into real life. And is the ground fertile enough for the everyday young Zimbabwean who perhaps wants to venture? Let's drive away from a little bit, because we do know many of the young people who are watching us are into the typical sectors which we've spoken about, which could be agriculture, engineering, mining, farming. But at the same time, we have an appreciation of talent-based entrepreneurship. And these are the people who have interests in arts, people who have interests in music, people who have interests within the sectors that intertwine the not everyday textbook learning. How best has the situation within our country been fertile for that? Perhaps Gashirai.
Well, I think over the last few years, with the introduction of of social media, digital marketing, and so on, you find that the ground is a certain level playing field has been created for the young people to participate in those talent-based businesses. I mean, you've seen the emergence of independent recording studios. We have, I think, in Africa, we probably have, I don't know, I'll come back to this up, but I'm pretty, we have the highest number of independent artists in Zimbabwe. We're not tied to many recording labels.
Oh, yes.
I mean, it's become so easy for one young man to pick up a mic, and the next thing is performing all over the country. So I feel that in terms of the technology space, yes, definitely significant strides have been made to open up the digital space for young people to be able to participate. And not even just looking at the arts or anything, but you find that the way we are so free to utilize all of these emerging technologies locally has made it easy for companies and young people to enhance their operations and their efficiencies in their business, being able to use all of these globally recognized platforms.
Okay, well, quite fascinating, and definitely, if you are watching us and obviously understand the economic aspects that come with your talent, you definitely want to stay tuned for this conversation, as we will be continuing it here on a ZBC TV. Economics 101 takes a short break. We'll be right back. Don't go anywhere. For staying with us. This is indeed Economics 101, where we track all things to do with economics. But today, it's a very special edition because we are looking all things to do with business economics with young people. And the two gentlemen who have stayed with me in studio tracking this conversation, Mr. Farai Muvuti, a young entrepreneur and publisher, and Gashirai Nyemba, who is a marketing consultant. Gentlemen, thank you for staying with us here on the program.
Thank you so much.
All right, Farai, perhaps I'll throw this one at you. We were talking about the vulnerability as well as readiness of social media and the social digital aspect of what has been happening around young people being prone to business. How important has that been with its contribution to growing our economy?
It's definitely important. Most economies in the world currently are driven by service industry. And service industry is your technology, your fintech, and so forth. In fact, one of the biggest startups growing in Africa right now is fintech. Alternative banking that is not based on brick and mortar.
Yes.
And so youth, it's driven mainly by youth, and youth are driving that particular aspect. Of course, ICT in Zimbabwe has its challenges by virtue of cost factors, but I think it's something that the ministry is aware of, and I think equally introducing some incentives to further develop and incubate that talent is equally important. So one of the things I would definitely recommend is either tax breaks, be it on costing for when it's costing your startup, because we haven't actually built the infrastructure for venture capital and startups. So in the absence of that, you want to go through policy, be it by virtue of, let's say a young person wants to start a fintech company. Let's support him by virtue of giving tax breaks where they make their first profit.
Yeah, but from an economic perspective, sorry to cut you off there, is venture capital, we do know that we had an appreciation of that in the previous dispensations as well as times at which Zimbabwe had an appreciation of that particular development. But at this present moment, especially for the sake of the young people, is there any proneness or any actual avidness for this economy to give room to venture capital? We do know that there were firms back then that actually gave very, very much space for venture capital. Is that going to be allowed?
Well, I think it should be allowed, and I think there's space for it. You know, there are many capital companies that have great interest, given the fact that we have so much innovation. I mean, one of the great examples one could use is simply EcoCash and how it began. Now, of course, it's a conglomerate now. It's a multi-million-dollar company now. But where it started from, you know, if you look at companies like M-Pesa in Kenya, right, we have that capacity. What we need to do is have the space to incubate that. And at the universities, the examples we gave earlier with the universities of that particular incubation, nurturing it, and the best way to do it in the absence of venture capital is private firms partnering with universities, whereby we nurture those particular industries from university level. If you look at countries such as the United States, for instance, MIT has a branch right there. Corporates have branches in MIT. So we should have your Econets at the UZ. We should have, and it's the same thing we would see in South Africa. We don't need to go very, very far. What that will help is incubate that particular talent and create streamlines of industry. So as a conclusion, my point would be, let us have, and the youth ministry is doing a lot around this, but let us equally complement that with actual industry.
Okay, absolutely. And Gashirai, a quick statistic here. Young people are in business but don't understand business. They want to understand making money. What's your quick take on that?
Look, I think it's actually very true, honestly. We have become so invested in the business of making money without actually creating platforms or frameworks to do business ethically. And you'll find, I would always encourage young people, you know what, find a mentor to attach yourself. Glean experience from those who have been in the sector you want to venture in. Because, you know, it's one thing to say, yes, we're the youth, we're taking over, we're the youth, we want to do this. But if we cannot build upon the successes of past generations and then improve upon that, then we really won't be going anywhere. We'll be going nowhere very slowly.
If I may just quickly add to that, you know, and I like what you just said at the end there.
In conclusion, absolutely.
I like what you said at the end there. That so in other words, youthfulness is not a prerequisite for productivity.
Exactly.
Just because you're youth doesn't mean that you actually are productive.
Exactly.
What is youth should be generative.
Okay.
So the question is, what is generative about you? So the aspect of having a mentor, the aspect of learning and learning on your feet, making mistakes, but with the right guidance, right?
Exactly.
I think is a great way to go. The final point I would make is, let us remember that as youth, in as much as we want to take over, let us retain the fact that every country in the world has an intergenerational linkage.
Exactly.
So you learn from the old, come in with the new.
Learn from the old and come in with the new. You've heard it here first on Economics 101, where the gentleman, Mr. Farai Muvuti, a young entrepreneur as well as a publisher, has joined us, and Mr. Gashirai Nyemba, who is a media as well as a marketing consultant. Thank you so much, gentlemen, for gracing us today.
Thanks for
Thank
having
you so
us.
much, Curtley.
Most definitely. And yes, this has been a very excitable edition of Economics 101, an episode where we have turned over, leaving no one and no place behind with regards to discourse around youth in business. And these young businessmen have definitely carried the conversation throughout the episode. Now, my name is Curtley Gwindi. From myself, the crew behind the scenes, and of course all of us at Pockets Hill, it is a pleasant viewing, and God bless Zimbabwe.
ZBC News, the real African voice.